Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be diving in.
Today we're jumping right into it, exploring that often, well, challenging.
But always fascinating.
Yeah, fascinating world of researching your family history,
Right.
specifically in colonial New England.
That's right. And we've dug into a source that lays out some really effective strategies.
Strategies for making sense of those early American records.
Exactly. The idea is to pull out the key tips from this article, the practical advice.
To help you navigate the, let's face it, inconsistencies and gaps you find in colonial records.
Mm-hmm. And maybe, just maybe, help you break through one of those research brick walls.
Because, yeah, anyone who's tried researching back then knows these records can be tough.
They really can. Incomplete sometimes, spelling all over the map.
Handwriting can be hard to read. Things get fragmented.
But, like the source points out, they're also incredibly rich. So much detail in there.
If you know how to find it, how to unlock it.
Precisely. And this source focuses on 5 core strategies. Really fundamental stuff for this era.
Okay, let's get into it. The first one seems to tackle maybe the most, basic but frustrating thing. Names.
Oh, definitely. Names and spelling.
My own family name has variations even now.
Yeah.
So what's the source say is the main challenge with colonial names?
Well, the first big takeaway, the absolute must-know, is you have to completely rethink spelling.
Rethink it. How so?
Standardization just wasn't, a thing back then. Not like today.
For surnames, first names.
All of it. Surnames, first names, even place names. Scribes, town clerks, ministers, whoever was writing. They often wrote names down phonetically, just how they sounded to them at that moment.
Ah, okay. So you might get Clark spelled C-L-A-R-K one day.
And then C-L-A-R-K-E the next. Absolutely. Sometimes even within the same document.
Wow, okay. The source gives those specific examples, right? Clark versus Clark.
It does. And green versus green. The variation is just, well, normal for the time.
So the strategy, the actionable part for someone researching,
is that you must actively look for those variations. Don't just type in one spelling.
you have to search for the variants, the phonetic equivalents. Assume inconsistency, basically.
Exactly. You have to cast a wide net.
That feels a bit counterintuitive, looking for things that seem wrong to our modern eyes.
It does, but it's crucial. And the source mentions a practical tip for digital searches.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
Using wildcard characters. Like an asterisk or question marks in a search box.
Like clack or clack.
Right. That can help the search engine find those variations automatically, which is really helpful.
Saves a lot of guessing.
It can. And remember, this applies to place names, too. They weren't fixed, either.
Like Wethersfield versus Wethersfield.
Precisely. It all stems from that lack of formal spelling rules and just individual interpretation of sounds.
Okay, that makes sense. So flexible searching for names and places. Got it. What's strategy number 2? It sounds like it's about the records themselves.
Yeah, this one addresses the reliability and completeness of the records you do find.
Because they might not tell the whole story.
Exactly. The core problem is that no single colonial record type or even collection is guaranteed to be complete or even totally accurate.
Right. They can be inconsistent, damaged, parts missing.
All of the above. So the really powerful strategy the source highlights is cross-referencing. You need to triangulate your finding.
Triangulate. Meaning?
Meaning you need to look for the same information or related information in different types of records. Don't rely on just one mention.
Okay, so what kinds of records are we talking about?
Well, the article mentions the obvious ones first. Vital records, births, marriages, deaths.
The basics.
The basics. But crucially, it points out these might be kept in the town records or in the church records.
Or both.
Or both, or sometimes, frustratingly, neither. So you absolutely have to check multiple places, multiple types of repositories for even those basic facts.
And I guess church records might have different details than town records?
Often, yes. Especially baptism details, membership transfers if families move congregations, sometimes little notes that give you more context.
Okay. And what if the vital records just aren't there for the period you need?
That's where land deeds and probate records become incredibly important. The source really stresses this.
Probate, so wills and inventories.
Exactly. And land records, the buying and selling of property, these documents often name heirs, spouses, children, neighbors.
Ah, so they can help you piece together family relationships even without a marriage or birth certificate?
Precisely. They can fill in huge gaps left by missing vital records. They describe relationships in a legal or financial context.
That's a great tip. The source also mentions something about using abstracts or transcriptions. A word of caution.
Yes, and it's a really important point. Abstracts and transcriptions, someone's typed up version of the original, are super convenient. We all use them.
Hmm.
But you have to remember, they are an interpretation. Someone else read that tricky handwriting, that faded ink.
And they might have misread something.
They might have. So the advice is always try to find the original record image if you possibly can. Compare it yourself.
And if you can't get the original, if you have to rely on abstracts,
Then the tip is to consult abstracts from multiple sources if they exist. Different people transcribing the same record might read a name or date differently.
so comparing, say, two different published abstracts of the same set of wills might reveal discrepancies.
Exactly. It helps you spot potential errors and gives you more confidence or raises necessary questions about the information.
Okay, good to know. All right, strategy number 3 seems to tackle actually reading the documents once you find them. This sounds like needing a secret decoder ring.
Huh. Well, maybe not a decoder ring, but you definitely need to learn a bit of a new language, or at least a dialect of English.
How so?
Colonial records are just full of abbreviations, specific handwriting styles, and terminology that we just don't use anymore.
And misunderstanding those could really mess up your research.
Totally. It could lead you down completely the wrong path if you misinterpret a keyword or abbreviation.
The source mentions some common ones, right? Like ye for the...
Yep, that's a classic. The letter thorn looked like a Y, and things like da for daughter, June for junior, those are pretty standard.
Okay. But it also mentioned handwriting styles. Secretary hand.
Right. Secretary hand was a common cursive style back then, and well, it looks quite different from modern cursive. Some letters are formed very differently. It takes practice to read accurately.
So you might need to look up examples of that specific script.
It really helps. There are online resources, paleography guides, specifically for colonial American handwriting. Even spending a little time familiarizing yourself makes a big difference.
And then there are the terms. The source mentioned warned out. That sounds kind of ominous.
It does sound harsh, doesn't it? But you need to understand the context. Being warned out wasn't necessarily personal animosity.
Oh, what was it then?
It was a formal legal process. A town was officially notifying a newcomer, hey, you're here, but we don't consider you a legal resident yet.
And the point of that was,
Primarily financial. It meant the town wouldn't be legally obligated to provide poor relief or support if that person or family fell on hard times. It was about managing liability.
oh, okay. So less about get out and more about you're not officially our responsibility yet.
Pretty much understanding that nuance is key. Same with terms like select men.
The town officials.
Right, the elected leaders managing town affairs, or freemen. That term often had specific legal meanings related to voting rights, land ownership, or church membership. It wasn't just a general term for a non-enslaved person.
So knowing the specific meaning of these terms in that time and place is crucial for understanding the record properly.
Absolutely crucial. It unlocks the real meaning behind the words.
And like the source suggests, spending even a little time with those paleography resources or glossaries for the era.
Pays off hugely. It improves your accuracy and the depth of information you can pull from the documents.
Makes sense. Okay, strategy number 4 feels like it's about geography. Don't stop at the town line. Why is that so important in colonial research?
This really gets at the fluidity of things back then. Geography, administration. It wasn't as rigid as we think of it today.
Boundaries weren't set in stone.
Not always. And critically, how records were kept wasn't uniform. It could vary wildly from one town to the next, even if they were right next door.
So if your ancestor seems to vanish from the records in, say, Springfield,
The most likely reason isn't that they actually vanished into thin air.
right, it's more likely they just moved. Maybe not even that far.
Exactly. Migration patterns were often very local. Families might move just a few miles to find cheaper land, better opportunities.
And suddenly they cross a line into a different town, or maybe even a different county's jurisdiction.
Precisely. And now their records land purchases, maybe joining a new church. Births of children are kept under that new jurisdiction system, which might be totally different.
And the source also mentioned church membership crossing town lines.
Yes. People didn't always attend the church physically closest to them. They might travel to a neighboring town for various reasons, maybe a preferred minister or family ties to that congregation.
And since we already know church records are important,
You need to consider looking at church records in surrounding towns, too, not just the town where they primarily lived according to, say, tax records.
the source even specifically flags checking adjoining colonies. Massachusetts Bay, Plymouth, Connecticut, Rhode Island.
It mentions how those colonies often had overlapping land claims. and boundaries shifted over time.
So someone living near a border might appear in records from two different colonies at different times.
It's definitely possible. You absolutely have to think beyond today's neat state lines or even county lines. Follow the potential trail.
Their records might just be filed under an authority you didn't initially expect.
Exactly. It highlights the real practical challenges people face just figuring out where they legally were sometimes.
Wow. Okay, that leads us to the fifth and final tip, which sounds like it ties everything together. Keep historical context in mind.
Yes, this is maybe the most overarching piece of advice.
How does knowing the broader history help when you're just trying to find, John Smith's birth date?
Because colonial history wasn't just like background scenery, it actively shaped people's lives day to day, and crucially for us, it shaped the records.
How so?
Major historical events, think wars, serious disease outbreaks, those border changes we just talked about, even big religious disagreements or schisms. All these things directly influenced how records were created, where they were kept, and whether they even survived for us to find today.
Okay, give me an example. Like, if I can't find records for a certain town during a specific decade.
It might not be that your ancestor wasn't there. It could be that the town was heavily impacted by, say, King Philip's War, or later the French and Indian War.
So conflict could mean records destroyed, people displaced.
Both. Or simply that regular record keeping got disrupted. Maybe the town clerk was off fighting, or the church was burned. Things happened.
That makes sense. What about town formation?
That's another key piece of context the source mentions. You need to know when the town you're researching was actually incorporated.
Because before that date.
Before that, the area might have belonged to an older parent town or just been under county or colony jurisdiction. So the records for your ancestor living there before the town officially existed would be filed under that earlier authority.
So you need to trace the town's own history back.
You do. And also understand the jurisdictional structure were records primarily kept by the town government, the church, the county court. It varied.
It sounds like viewing the records, and maybe even the gaps where records are missing, through that historical lens, helps make sense of why things look the way they do.
It really, really does. And the source makes, I think, a very profound point about this. Keeping that historical context front and center reminds us to approach these records, and especially those frustrating gaps and absences, with empathy.
Empathy.
Yeah, and nuance, remembering that our ancestors weren't just names on a page. They were real people navigating significant historical forces.
They were moving, adjusting to boundary changes, dealing with conflict or disease.
Exactly. They adapted. They made choices based on the world around them, seeing the records or lack thereof as reflecting those lived experiences.
That human element that makes them feel more real.
It absolutely does. It turns the research from just collecting data into understanding lives lived within a specific, often very challenging historical reality.
Okay, so let's quickly recap these five really powerful strategies from the source for tackling colonial genealogy.
Sounds good.
First, be flexible with spelling, expect variations, use wildcards in searches, because phonetic spelling was the norm for names and places.
Right. Second, triangulate. Cross-reference findings across different record types, town, church, land, probate, because no single source is perfect or complete.
Third, learn the language. Get familiar with the abbreviations, the handwriting styles like secretary hand, and the specific terminology of the time. Misreading leads you astray.
Fourth, think geographically beyond just the town. Check surrounding towns, counties, even colonies, because people moved locally and boundaries shifted all the time.
And fifth, context is king. Always consider the historical backdrop: wars, town formations, jurisdictional changes, because these events shape the very records you're searching for.
Applying those really does increase your chances of connecting the dots, getting past those brick walls.
And ultimately telling a much richer, fuller family story.
Definitely.
And I think that final point from the source, that idea about empathy, is really sticking with me. Approaching the records and those silences where records are missing.
Remembering the families adapting to historical forces you can still kind of trace today.
It leads to that final provocative thought. What historical forces, big or small, maybe even more recent ones, have shaped your family's story? And how might looking at your own history through that kind of lens
change how you approach understanding your past?
A really powerful question to end on.
Indeed.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.